Hey folks, Dust here, and I wanted to do a video about the Challenger stage of the IEM Katowice 2019 CSGO Major, and I'll be talking about each stage of the Major, but to kick things off, I wanted to talk about the initial stage, and I thought a good vehicle to do so would be the Pick'em Challenge inside of the game with the new viewer pass and all that good stuff, and so I'm going to talk through each of these teams and then also do my pick 'em alongside of it, basically. So maybe all of you out there, maybe you're on the fence about what you want to do with your pick 'em. Maybe this will influence you a little bit or help you out a little bit. Not really sure, but I just knew I wanted to talk about the major a little bit, do some content around the major. I thought this was a cool way to do it. And so we'll do that. And so basically what I've done is I've broken this up into a bunch of different categories for each team. So I have some teams I think are guaranteed to make it through. I have some teams that are likely to go through. I have some teams that are a little bit iffy. I'm kind of on the fence about. Then I have a few teams that I know won't make it, but won't go 0-3. And then I have a couple of teams that I think are possibly going to go 0-3. And also, I just want to let you know up front that kind of my tactic of doing this pick'em in the past, though I think things are a little bit different on the rule set this time around, but I'm still going to kind of keep the same strategy, is if there's a team that I think is a sure win to go through the stage, I don't pick them to go 3-0 because I feel like there's always a chance you might drop a best of one, but I feel like you're still going to make it through the challenger stage. And so if they don't go 3-0, but they go through, you don't get any credit for picking them 3-0 if they went 3-1. You see what I'm saying? So I typically do my sure bets on the lower end of just advancing, and then I'll pick kind of a team that I'm iffy on to go 3-0. So that's just kind of how I've always done it. And maybe you think that's a dumb strategy, maybe it's a good strategy, but I'm just letting you know up front that's how I do things, and then you can kind of change your mind on what you want to do accordingly. So we'll start off with teams I think are guaranteed going through. And I'll start off by picking Fnatic as a team that I think is guaranteed to go through, so I'll go ahead and drag them in here. And the reason for that is they were in great form at IEM Chicago, having almost made it to the finals of the event over Astralis. They had a really close semifinals appearance against Astralis there. They took a map off of them on Mirage and played them really close in the other two games, including an overtime loss on Inferno. They beat Big and Team Liquid earlier in the event as well. They won that PLG event. Not really any big competition there, but at least it took care of business and got a win. Managed to beat Cloud9 in the groups at the IEM Power Masters event very recently, and were able to play a close semifinals against Team Liquid. And they just have lots of talent, with Crims having just a superior level of performance lately, one of the top 20 players from last year, and just a really consistent driving force. He's really gotten back to that form that he had, a few years ago when he was like the best player in the world. Like, he is such an excellent edge of the map player, can be very passive, but also can find openings when he needs to. He's very flexible, but he's just so good playing on the edge of the map on T sides. He's very good site anchor on CT sides. And Twist and Brawl and the new players they've brought in from Red Reserve and Godsent and things of that, they have been playing pretty well in this team so far. And I just feel like they are doing great in the tournaments they've played in thus far. I think that they're a guaranteed team to go through, though I don't think they're necessarily going to go 3-0. They could certainly drop a map in a best of one, but I think, and they can maybe even lose the best of three at some point down the line if they make it there, but I think they will certainly make it through, and so I wanted to put them there. Another team for me that I think is guaranteed to make it through, but I don't want to put them 3-0, is going to be NRG. And the reason for that is really that they have been great in the North American scene, particularly in the Pro Leagues Online. They were first in ECS the last 2 seasons in a row in the regular season. They were second in EPL in Season 7 and fourth in Season 8. With everything going on, I feel like they're kind of next in line in the North American region outside of Team Liquid. I mean, MIBR is certainly going to be there. Ghost is quite good. Cloud9's revamping. But I feel like Energy is really up there in the North American, or the Americas rather, totem pole. Finally got going offline in the middle of 2018. They had a second place finish at the Starlighter Season 5 finals to Navi after beating Team Liquid and North and Renegades and Hellraisers in best of threes. Some immediate disappointment at the minor, obviously not making it to the FACEIT Major. That was really the dark mark on this team. But since then, they've had some top 4 finishes, particularly the big one is the ESL1 New York, where they actually beat FaZe 2-0, and they lost the eventual winner, Mouse Sports, in the semis. They also had a really good top 4 finish at Starlighter Season 6. They had some misses at DreamHack Masters Stockholm, but to be fair, they only lost to NiP and Navi. And then IEM Chicago was also disappointing, losing to LDLC. But then they kind of, had their win at CS Summit 3 over Ghost Heroic, Big, and Optic. And they placed second only to Team Liquid at Malta at that Supernova event. And then, they came into this most recent minor for this major and took care of business. Didn't really have any struggles either. They kind of dominated the minor, to be honest. Really weren't even challenged at all. This team has great talent with players like Breezy and Ethan and Cirque. Daps is a great in-game leader. They have some good strategy. I'm a pet as a coach really helps in with that. Fugly, a pretty good other rifler to kind of support the team and fill what roles are needed. And, their map pool isn't super deep, but it's really well spread out, and they're competitive on most maps. And I feel like with all that, you got to put this team to finally take care of business and go through. So that's why I've put them here. So the next team I think will make it through, but maybe not go 3-0, is going to be Cloud9. And the thing is, this team is really hard to put your finger on due to all of the roster instability. I mean, they've had Refresh stand in, they've had Valens have to stand in from the coach position. There's all the issues with Golden, their in-game leader that's been out due to illness. There has been so much going on, but Zelstis has been on the team for a couple of events, and we've seen some improvement from them at these events between the IEM Power Masters and the E-League Invitational, particularly in the individual form of some of their players. Like Kiyoshima has been playing really, really well for this team ever since he joined. Flesh is starting to step his level up. At least you're starting to see Rush have good games again. He hasn't really hit that consistency level, but at least he's having some big games here and there, which is what you want to see. And I'll tell you this, I feel like Unimatic has been better than expected switching to a main opera role. I was really worried about his performance because he was such a good rifler and was so consistent, was putting up really good numbers. I thought that it would fall off, but in the opping position, while he's not as impactful as he was as a rifler, he still is finding ways to be useful, and he still is having some pretty good games and having some pretty good impact on the team. And they did really well at the E-League Invitational, had some 2-0 victories over FaZe and Big, and had a close finals loss to FaZe later on in the tournament. While they didn't make it out of groups at IEM Power Masters, losing to Fnatic in the key best of one, we've at least seen some of their individuals step up and play really well lately. And I just feel like the talent on this team is good enough to get them through the stage. And while I don't think they will necessarily go 3-0, that's why I'm not putting them there, I think they should at least make it through, and that's why I have included them here. So another team that I think should make it through, but maybe not go 3-0, is going to be INTZ of Finland. This team has done so well at a slew of different Tier 2 events. They narrowly missed out on that last European minor. They came 3rd place, and I feel like since then they've really just built. They came 2nd at DreamHack Montreal, 1st at Starlighter Season 6, 1st at DreamHack Winter, 1st at this most recent European minor. And along the way, they've beaten the likes of Valiance, North, Heroic, Optic a couple of times, G2, Big, Vega Squadron, Tyloo, Mouse Sports. And they had that cool top 8 finish at a Tier 1 event, the ESL1 Cologne, where they narrowly lost to Navi in the last match of the group stage after having BO3 victories over NIP and Mouse. They have a really good amount of talent on this team. I mean, Sergey is legit. I feel like he's the best player in the class of players he comes from, alongside some of the Fraxters guys like Stound and Refresh, a guy like Brolin, a guy like Rops. I feel like this guy has been a better performer than all of those guys. He's only 16 years old. He's a great flexible rifler. He tends to be a little bit more on the passive side, but I feel like at times he can go with Aerial and Alexa B and do some entry, so he is quite flexible. Alu is that steady opper and a veteran, lots of experience, and he's been putting up monster numbers lately for INTZ. He's not just steady anymore. He's a straight-up star player and doing really, really well. And Aaron and Alexa B are doing great, and Alexa B is doing it while being the in-game leader. And one of the big things about INTZ is they have a really deep map pool compared to some of these teams in the stage. I mean, they have huge win rates on Dust 2, Inferno, Train. They're solid on Nuke and Mirage. They're okay on Cash in the few games I've seen them play, although I guess it is on the weaker end next to Overpass. But they actually do have a lot going for them. They've been performing really well. And I think that this is a team that's probably destined to go top 8 at this major, to be 100% honest, but certainly will make it through the stage. I think them and Energy and maybe Fnatic are some of the teams that I feel like had the best chance to go deep in this major coming from this stage. And so I definitely want to put INTZ up there to do well here. Now, another team that I'm going to put here that I think is likely going to make it through is going to be NIP. Now, they haven't played as much as some of the other teams in the late 2018 season, but they did manage to win the previous European minor way back in July of 2018. Since then, they've also come top 4 at the DreamHack Masters in September, only losing to Astralis. They made it past the Challenger status to face it major and narrowly lost to Made in Brazil for the Legend slot. They also did come 2nd at that Blast Pro Series in Copenhagen to Navi after beating teams like Astralis, Made in Brazil, and Cloud9 in the group stage. They also took top 4 at ECS Season 6 with a close loss to Astralis in the semis after wins over Energy and North. They had a tough time at Lisbon, but they still have the talent and coordination to make it past this stage, in my opinion. I feel like the only thing that's really hurting this team is the fact that they don't really have a true, consistent performing star-level player. They have a couple players who are quite good, who can perform, but there's really no one that's like carrying this team, which can be nice. You're spreading out the performances amongst the entire lineup, particularly guys like Forrest, Dennis, and Lekro. But in Rez, obviously. But yeah, they don't really have like a superstar player that's always performing really well. But I still think that they have enough to make it through the challenger stage. Now we're getting into our teams that I feel are a bit iffy to make it through, with only 2 spots left and kind of what my guaranteed to advance teams are. And so these are the teams I'm going to be kind of picking from to go 3-0, because I know these teams are going to advance that I've picked. But these are teams that I think could advance, and I might fit one of them into 3-0. So of those, we'll start with Vitality. This team obviously has had lots of struggles to perform. They even struggled to make this minor for this major with all these different losses online, and they even lost the Star Ladder qualifier to Spirit and lost another smaller online tournament to Valiants. They did win DreamHack Atlanta over teams like Fractures, Rogue, Complexity, and Luminosity, but there's not really a lot of credit to be given when you consider the state of these teams. I mean, Luminosity is going through roster changes. Complexity's really had their struggles. They've made 2 roster changes. Rogue had just gotten MSL coming into this event. And then Fractures are using a stand-in at Atlanta. So that win in Atlanta is not really as great as it might appear on the surface. They did do well this European minor. That is true, with the wins over Optic and Valiant, and they traded some series with North. But they got carried by ZywOo big time. This dude went plus 81 on the KD ratio, and the next in line was MBK at 0. The rest were negative. That is a crazy number line when you think about it on how much ZywOo carried. So I feel like this team really relies on ZywOo to perform for them to be able to get the wins they need to get. Now, with that said, there is a lot of experience on this team. You know that Apex is capable of going off. You know that MBK is a pretty valuable fragging in-game leader. RPK, when he's up to his level like he was last year, he can be good. So there's a lot of potential on this team. I'm a little bit worrisome still about Alex. I don't know if he was really necessarily the right fit to pick up for Happy, but I don't know. I just feel like there's still certainly a chance for this team to perhaps come to this group. So they're like a 3-0 candidate, but we're going to talk to a couple more teams real quick. Another team that's iffy for me is going to be G2. Now, this team had their struggles with Existence and Smiths. They brought on Lucky and Jack since then. And while they did fall in groups at DreamHack Winter in their debut to teams like Bravado and Ints, they did come second at PLG with some wins over Avantgarde, Hellraisers, and Sharks, which are some teams that are at the level of teams that are playing in this challenger stage, ultimately losing to Fnatic there. They did beat out Vitality for WESG, and they narrowly missed out on IEM Sydney recently online, losing to Big in the finals of that qualifier after having beat Optic, Fours, and 3D Max. And these are all teams at the level of the teams they're going to be playing at in the challenger stage, or at least some of them, I would say. I've also heard some rumors they're dominating in practice, and people are being kind of impressed by them. I do think Lucky and Jax are some skill upgrades to some of the players they removed to bring in these 2 guys. And I think that because of that, you know, Kenny S has been performing pretty well lately. He's kind of hitting back. Lucky's been playing really well. So I feel like there's definitely a likelihood that they could make it out. I'm on the fence about them. I think they're certainly a candidate. Another candidate for me is going to be Avantgarde. There is lots of CIS talent on this team, between Jame, Buster, and Quickert in particular. And they did really good at this last minor to qualify for this major. They didn't do too hot, though, at that PLG event, and that's what kind of irked me a bit. But at least they were able to beat some of their regional rivals over at Vegas Squadron and Wendigo and some best threes at that Bucharest Games Week. But then they also fell really early at IEM Chicago to Luminosity and Mouse Sports. But you also got to add in the fact that they did upset NIP at Epicenter and they beat Hellraisers, and in general has played Navi close in some games that they've played them. So there's a lot of hit and miss here for Avantgarde, but that talent is there, and that's why I feel like they're a team that has at least a chance to maybe make it through. And Renegade's another one I have to feel like has a chance to make it through. They won another Asian minor coming into this major, so business as usual there. They had qualified for the most recent ECS and EPL finals. They had to pull out of ECS due to scheduling conflicts with this minor. And they've been doing really well in general in North American regional play, which is the main region they're playing pro leagues in. They did look okay at the EPL Season 8 finals with some wins over Vici, Big, and G2, and some close series losses to Mouse Sports. G2 was, of course, though, using Existence and Smith at this event, so that takes away a little bit from that result. They didn't do too much at Toyota Masters either, only really beating smaller teams and losing to Heroic and Tyloo, and they lost to LDLC and Made in Brazil to go out pretty quickly at IEM Chicago. Some things they do have going for them, though, is the fact that they have Kassad back as a coach, and JKS has been on point lately. Azur has actually had some resurgence in form in the most recent events. Gratisfaction has also been performing pretty well recently. While Yas has been struggling a little bit, Jacob has been fine. He's been playing really well. So they've had some players performing. They got Kassad back as a coach, and at least I've seen something for them recently. So I think they have actually a chance to make it through. They're on the iffy side for me. Tyloo's on the iffy side as me because I feel like I'm just kind of gambling on them. I mean, they just brought back Summer and Attacker. They've had no matches since then. There's been lots of chaos with this team. There's always been issues with their communication. And they just brought in a new coach with Jonto from Hellraisers, which I think can add to the team, but how much is he going to be able to add in this time period between now and the major? They definitely have some really skilled players and explosive play style. They've really struggled a lot in recent events. When you think about PLG, the Supernova event in Malta, as well as Starlighter Season 6. Those are some really, really rough events for them. They've been known to have upset potentials. They have some good players, and they can have some cool results at times, but they've really had their struggles. And so these are all teams, you know, that are iffy for me, but I got to pick one to go 3-0. And I think I'm going to pick Vitality. And it's not because I think they actually will go 3-0. I think that they're going to skate by if they advance, but I don't want to risk these 5 teams down here. You know, these teams I think are definitely going to go through, but they could drop a map at some point or maybe even drop their first best of 3. So I don't want to just ride on them. I think either of these teams are capable of going 3-0, but I don't want the sure thing that they're advancing. And then I'm going to gamble an iffy team on 3-0. Now, of the other teams I think that could advance, basically it comes down to me for these last couple of teams to advance would be between G2, Avangard, Renegades, and Vega Squadron, and I guess Tyloo. You know, 2 of these last 5 teams are the teams I think are most likely to advance. So I'm just going to pick 2 of those 5. And I'm going to go with... I'll pick Tyloo. I'll risk it. I think between the fact that they've made some upgrades in skill, kind of getting rid of Captain Mondidi and bringing in somewhere an attacker and having Jonta as a coach and just knowing how good Bintet and Exkert have been, I think that they're going to be good enough to at least get through this stage this time around. So I'm going to go ahead and pick them. That is obviously a little bit of a gamble, but I just feel like I have a little bit of faith in them. The other team I feel like I have just a small amount of faith in, though I'm not necessarily sold, is going to be G2. I actually don't know why I'm picking this team to advance. I might even change my mind at some point throughout this video, but I'm just going to put them there for now, just because at least they were able to do all right at PLG and, you know, beat out Vitality for WESG and at least do okay in that IEM Sydney qualifier, though they did lose to Big in the finals, but maybe it's enough to get through. What I'm really doing is playing the odds here because I only need to, I think one of the challenges is to get 5 correct. So I just need like 1 of G2, Tyloo, and IP to make it through alongside some of the 4 sure wins I have. And I think that I still win that challenge, right? So that's kind of what I'm going with. So let's look at the teams that I feel like are not going to make it through. And then from there, we're going to have to pick some 0-3 teams, obviously. So for Vega Squadron, this team surprised last major and went further than anyone really expected because they really hadn't done much heading into that major, as the core had kind of lost Mir, made some other changes, and you couldn't really expect much. They did get silenced pretty fast after beating North in that best of 3 last major. You know, they beat C9 in their opening game, but then lost to Astralis, Fnatic, and NiP in, you know, pretty one-sided fashion and were out of that major. But they did do really well directly afterwards. They started Season 6 upsetting Energy and going all 5 maps with Ints. But since then, we haven't really seen them play much, so I don't really know what to expect. Then when it comes to Furia, this team did make some noise in mid-2018 with some wins over Complexity and E United at the Zotac Americas LAN. But they lost to Ghost in the finals. They didn't really do anything after that. I mean, they got onto the minor for the face of major really fast by digging Complexity. Really quiet for most of the year. But they did online manage to knock out teams like NV Singularity and Ghost in that Starlighter Season 7 qualifier. They also did beat out teams like Luminosity and Soul Patrol to make this minor. And then at this minor, they did beat NV United and ENTS, the other Brazilian team, for the slot at the major, with the only loss really being to Energy. We know that K. Sorrell is a really good player. He was even a guy being looked at by Made in Brazil. And Yuri also played really good at this minor. And they have some cool tactics, and they have some cool little tricky plays they can throw out there. So this is definitely a team that I feel like can make some noise in this stage, and they even maybe could advance, but I don't expect them to. Vichi's the other team that I feel like you have to kind of think about because while I don't really know much about them personally outside of like what they did at this minor upsetting North, and their really only notable result outside of that, to be honest with you, is beating Tyler and MVPK at that EPL Season 8 closed qualifier back in September. I mean, Freeman and Kaze are nuts, and Kaze's been nuts for a while, even when he played for Flash. And I know Freeman's been a player of the Chinese scene that people have always kind of kept their eye on, but it's really hard to know what they're going to do. I think they have enough upset potential to get some maps here, but I can't expect them to advance from the group. Now, I'm going to talk about the teams I think that are maybe going to go 0-3. That's going to make my final pick of this pick'em. And we'll start with Spirit. Now, while they did do well at the CIS Minor, and they do have a couple of decent players like some Dayong and Coldy, and Davkos is all right, they haven't really done a whole lot for me. They did pretty poorly at the last major outside that best of one upset over North. They've had no real offline success outside of that Chongqing Invitational way back in March of 2018, where they had some wins over MVPK and Boot Dreamscape. They did okay at the previous CS Minor for the Face It Major. You know, maybe you can consider beating E United at that best of 3 at the ESCA Season 27 Global Challenge back in May of 2018, a cool result. But outside of that, man, they haven't done a whole hell of a lot for me. So, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot of faith in them, to be 100% honest. Then we'll talk about Greyhound. They did well at this minor, getting wins over Vici and AVPK to make it to this point. They even beat Renegades in the best of 3 to qualify for this most recent minor. And they do well within their region against the likes of Order, Chiefs, Tainted Minds, and Trident, and etc. But not much outside of that. I will say Sterling's pretty damn nuts. Dexter and Urcast seem pretty solid. But they just don't really have any big lane results for me, and especially outside of their region. The only exception of which is when they beat SK and took a map off a phase at IEM Sydney back in May of 2018, but with different players on this team. So for me, they have to be an 0-3 candidate for that, despite the fact that Dick Stacey is a legend with all the memes. And then the last thing to talk about then, of course, is going to be Windstrike, which they've only had this 5 since November of last year. Kavik and Boomich are the only long-standing members left. They just got Norbert, Waylander, and World at it. And outside of some best of 1 wins over Envy and Vici to make this major, they haven't done a whole hell of a lot. And they didn't even look that great in the minor, to be 100% honest. I mean, they had some big losses to Spirit and Avangar, and they did beat Avangar early in the tournament, not when it really mattered. And then I guess they had an upset over Gambit, but I mean, Gambit's not really the same team anymore with all the roster changes, particularly losing guys like Hobbit and Adren. So I don't even know how much value I put on upsetting Gambit at the minor. So with all that said, the team that's been least impressive to me between the 3 teams, Spirit, Greyhound, and Windstrike, is probably Greyhound and Windstrike, to be honest. And the team I'll pick to go 0-3 to finish this thing off is going to be, in fact, Windstrike. But I do certainly think that Spirit and Greyhound are also pretty valid candidates for this position. So with that said, I've picked a couple of teams I think are sure wins. Fnatic, Energy, Cloud9, Ents, and Nip to definitely make it. I think Tyloo and G2 are on the fence alongside teams like Furia, Renegades, and Avangar. And then I think Vitali's also in that, and I want to gamble them on 3-0, despite the fact that I don't really think they're actually going to go 3-0, but I don't want to risk these 5 teams in that slot. And then for 0-3, I think it's between teams like Spirit, Greyhound, and Windstrike, and I've just selected Windstrike. So hope you folks enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe for more content. I'll do some more content around this major as we go forward, and I'll catch you next time.